That's so weird. Okay, chapter 23, verse 41. Hashem, Shivat Yamim, and you shall celebrate for yourself. Take a picture of us and send it to him. So celebrate for yourself a festival for 7 days, b'shana, in the year, chukato amudorotechem, your eternal law in your generation, b'chodesh hashvi tachogoso. So this is a 7-day holiday. Now this is the question that Jerry was talking about. Sukkot teshvu shivat yamim. In the Sukkot you shall dwell for 7 days. And Jerry was saying, are these actual Sukkot? Where do we see them living in Sukkot? And so that's the dispute in the Gemara. And Rashi's going to weigh in on that in just a moment, Jerry. Rashi, I think, is going to answer your question. Because Jerry's saying they lived in an Oel. They didn't live in a Sukkah. So why does it say God says, I caused you to dwell in a Sukkah for 7 days? So Rashi says, what's an Ezrach? That's a Ezrach. This is a native, a Jew by birth. The women are not obligated to sit in a Sukkah. So you might have thought Rashi says that from the 15th of Pesach, where women are obligated to have matzah, you might have said, okay, let's compare it to the 15th of Tishrei and say women are obligated to sit in the sukkah, but we say women are not obligated in the sukkah. So in many communities, women don't sit in the sukkah for that reason, because they're not obligated. And also it's a pain, it's cold, and they don't want to go in. So Sukkot is a little bit like a man's holiday because the women aren't obligated, but some women love it. But most of the women in my family are not really big fans of sitting in the sukkah because it's hard. But I'll tell you a story about the Rebbe. I forget which Rebbe. They said to him he loved sitting in the sukkah, but the halacha is that if you're mitzvah, you're patur min sukkah. If you're in distress, I think this might have been, I forget which, it might have been the vision or I don't know. If you're in distress, you're exempt from the sukkah. So I mean to say if it's raining on your soup, then the Gemara says that you don't have to sit in the sukkah because you're in distress. If you would the halacha is if you would leave your room under those circumstances, then you should leave the sukkah. Like if it's raining into your room and you would leave the room, you should leave your sukkah. But then the Rebbe was sitting in the sukkah even though it was raining, and he said, "What are you doing? You're a mitzvah, and so therefore you're patur. You're in distress. You're exempt from the sukkah." So the Rebbe said, "For me, it's more distressful to have to leave the sukkah. That's the biggest distress for me. Having to leave the sukkah. I'd rather sit in the sukkah in the rain." That's better for me. That's more beautiful for me. That's more beloved than leaving the sukkah. So that's why some Hasidim sit in the sukkah in the pouring rain. Yeah, of course. One year we had a raccoon that decided to join us in the sukkah. That's also not fun. So, but you know how to trap a raccoon on Yantif. So now we're trapping it today. We're trying to get rid of it.
Oh, it's back?
It's not the same one, but it's a different one. Oh. Okay, so now we come to the next pasuk, and this is what Jerry was talking about. So all your generations will know that I caused you to dwell in Sukkot when I led you out from Egypt. And Jerry's asking the question, where did they actually live in a sukkah? They didn't live in a booth, they lived in tents. Jerry's so sharp, he asked that question. So Rashi here says, Ananei kavod, clouds of glory. Rashi's saying that when it says, I caused you to dwell in Sukkot, the pasuk is not saying that we lived in an actual sukkah, just saying we lived in God's saying that what is the sukkah that we lived in? The clouds of glory. That's the sukkah that we lived in. This is a dispute. If Rabbi Yosef will pull up the Gemara in Sukkah 11b, this is the dispute between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. That Rabbi Akiva says that Rabbi Eliezer says Sukkot mamash, that these are actual Sukkot, or Rabbi Akiva says Ananei Kavod, clouds of glory. So Rashi follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And Nachmani says that it's more likely to assume that the pshat, the literal explanation, is like whom? Who do you think the literal explanation is more likely to be in accordance with? Who would you say, Eitan? Is the pshat like Rabbi Akiva, who says that the Sukkot refers to clouds of glory? Or like Rabbi Eliezer, who says that the clouds refers to actual booths or huts that we lived in? Who do you think the pshat is like?
Rabbi Eliezer.
You would say Rabbi Eliezer. And what about Itai? What do you say? And what about you, Kobe? Well, Ramban says the pshat is like, what would you say, Dan?
I guess I'll go with the crowd.
So Ramban says that the pshat is not like Rabbi Eliezer, but like Rabbi Akiva. Because if it was just a regular hut, why would we have to make a whole holiday to commemorate a hut that we lived in? It's more likely to assume, says Ramban, that the pshat is that it was a clouds of glory, because that's something worthy of making a whole festival about. That's a miracle. So anyway, that's the Ramban. But here, Rabbi Yosef pulled up, opened the Gemara. That's the position of Rabbi Eliezer, whereas Rabbi Akiva says Sukkot mamash asuaham. So okay. Anyway, that's the beautiful Gemara. But you could always say this as a Dvar Torah, your Sukkot table, and you'd say which one is the more the pshat, which one is more literal reading of the verse, and ironically, it's the explanation of Ramban that's the more literal reading of the verse. Okay, so then. Okay, so now we're up to the next verse. Okay, so now we go on to the next Torah reading for. Well, actually, we go back to the beginning of the Torah reading because we didn't do the beginning. Tomorrow we'll do the next day's Torah reading, but today at this point to go into the next one, let's go to the beginning of the Torah reading, which is Daber al Bnei chapter. Hold on. Beginning of the chapter.
Which chapter of the book?
We're in Leviticus, and it's Shoro Chasef Oez, chapter 22, verse 26. Then when I was at Ohev, when I was the rabbi there, Aaron Troy used to be the Torah reader for this on the first days of Sukkot. It was excellent, and it was his bar mitzvah, and it is his bar mitzvah parsha. Right. So now up to chapter 22, verse 26. If you walk here on Yontif, you can read the Torah for us, Eitan. God spoke to Moshe saying, Shoro kasef oez, if there'll be an ox or a sheep or a goat, ki valed, shivat yamim tachat imo. So the halacha is that when a baby animal is born, that the first 7 days you're not allowed to slaughter it. Why not? And then the 8th day and onward, it will be brought as an offering, sacrifice to God. So this is the halacha that it cannot be brought as a sacrifice. You have to wait 7 days. What's the reasoning? I want to make sure I want to make sure, presumably, that it's viable. Hey boys, how are we doing?
That would be 30 days, no?
What?
A human baby is 30 days.
Human baby is
30 days.
30 days.
That's why we have
yeah.
Pidyon.
But these babies can walk right away. They're very different.
But the Torah doesn't give us the reason, right?
Torah doesn't give us the reason. No. Okay, then we have the next halacha. Now we have the next halacha. Again, we don't know the reasoning for him, but this is actually relevant to Yom Tif. The halacha is brought about this in the Talmud, that an ox and a sheep, an ox and a lamb, you cannot slaughter on the same day. Meaning to say, you're not allowed to slaughter a mother with its offspring. Some say also a father. You're not allowed to slaughter one opinion of the Gemara is, so you're not allowed to slaughter a mother and its offspring on the same day. Rashi says here, no egg ben akiva. It applies to the female. she'asur ushlot ha'em v'abenu abat ve'enu noeg b'scharim. It doesn't apply to the males, and you're allowed to slaughter a father and his offspring on the same day. But you see here the Gemara in Chulin, it's a question whether it also applies to the father. But why is this relevant? Because the whole year you don't have to be worried about it. But on Erev Yontif, or everybody was slaughtering the animals, then you'd have to be worried about it. Then you have to be worried. And so then you have to ask the butcher. But the rest of the time, we assumed.
But
Okay? What?
are you allowed to sell it to a goy even though you know that he might do it the same day? Meaning, are you mitzvah not to cause him to
Well,
do
the
something
question
against
wouldn't be
his
to a goy. The question would be, are you allowed to sell it to a Jew? Who
to
you
a Jew?
think
You
might-
just said that you have to ask the butcher when was the father slaughtered, or sorry, mother. But I'm asking if you are allowed to sell it to a non-Jew, even though you might be causing.
I don't remember that the Gemara said that that was prohibited. And also, a non-Jew is allowed to slaughter the mother and the offspring on the same day. The non-Jew is not commanded in this mitzvah.
Right, but you also aren't allowed, like if you found, no, maybe not. Just like you're not allowed to tell a goy to do work on Shabbat. It's not because he's not allowed to do work, it's because you aren't allowed to tell him to
Oh
do
yeah, but you're saying, so you're not, are you allowed to ask, no, so you're saying you're allowed to give it to the non-Jew to slaughter for you or to slaughter for himself?
Well, for you, for sure not. But
Why do you say that? For sure not.
because he's helping you do an Avera.
No, the Avera is for you to slaughter it. If the, let me put it in this way, let's say the animal would be slaughtered, would it be okay to eat? Would it be kosher? We'd have to go back and look at all the halachos in this Gemara. But for now, we're going to dive in Mincha. These are a lot of questions. When we get to Daf Yomi for Chulin, we'll discuss all these questions. A big shkoyach to everybody. Right, let's dive in Mincha now. Shkoyach.